Welcome and salut. Let's get into it. This week, I want us to get a little bit spiritual. I believe that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. I'm going to say that again. I believe that we are spiritual beings that are having a physical experience. And it therefore means that in this physical realm that we're living, where everything is very practical, we can be very pragmatic. If it's not like if 1 plus 1 has to equal 2 all the time, I believe that in this physical experience that we are having, there are many spiritual occurrences that take place. If you believe in God, the divine, in any kind of other power, you call yourself Christian, Muslim, it doesn't really matter. To me, that indicates, or that is an indication, that within your spirit, within your mind, you believe that there are things that happen beyond the veil that you can currently see. Call it magic, call it God, doesn't really matter what you want to call it. There are things beyond our ken, our basic understanding. That's the reality that we are operating in. And I bring this up because I recently had the opportunity to reconnect with a dear friend who I don't get to see very often, but I'm often moved by the way that this person navigates life, the way that they think through life, and the way that they share their experiences of life. So I'm going to call this friend Sarah, okay? Sarah and I were catching up over the phone, and I think I posted something on Instagram, social media. You know what it's like. You're on social, so because you're posting things, everyone thinks, oh, we're in touch. We've seen each other. And so Sarah reaches out. It's like, hey, girl, how you doing? It's been a while. I see you doing great things. It's amazing, yada, yada, yada. And so I respond. I'm like, yo, Sarah, tell me, how are you? And she's like, well, I haven't been so great. I haven't been so great. What's going on? Well, I've had like a series of medical issues. I'm just trying to keep my spirits up, trying to keep my head up. I'm doing my best. I pick up the phone and I call, because Sarah is not the kind of person to express discomfort in the first place. She's not the kind of person to express unwellness. So the fact that this babe like literally typed that out to me on social media, I was like, no, this is serious. And I called and I was like, yo, tell me what's been going on. And she reveals this insane tale of, first of all, swelling in her legs. There've been kind of issues. She's been wondering what's been going on. Went to the doctor. Doctor, after a lot of back and forth examining, said that there are these valves that aren't working very well in her legs, that they're not allowing blood to flow back. So, it's pooling in her legs and causing these like serious issues, like crazy swelling. So compression socks, uplifting feet. After more investigation, because there was a bit of a long story, they now discover that Sarah, this issue is also connected to Sarah's heart. But what could be causing the heart problem? Because she's now seeing a specialist at this point. Especially recommends that she goes to Luth to see yet another specialist. And that specialist is like, all right, let's do a bunch of scans. Let's see what's going on. And in running all these tests and doing all these scans, they're like, we don't even know how you can be alive and conscious now, because we can't find your heart. We can't hear your heartbeats. And she's like, I don't know. What do you mean you can't hear my heartbeat? So like, it's so faint. We can't hear your heart. Searching or like, where your heart should be, the left side of your chest, and they're checking the chest cavity. And when scans come out, it turns out that Sarah's heart is on the right side of her chest. And there's a particular name they give it. Please excuse me if I don't know the name right now. So Sarah is like, no, but I wasn't born this way. Like, I've done tests before. I've been to the hospital before. I've had medical issues before. My heart exists on the left side of my chest. And they're like, well, look at the x-rays. Somehow your heart is now on the right side of your chest and not the left side. Wonderfully wonderful. Sarah, how your heart take move from left to right? Because normally hearts no they travel. This is a wonderment. This is a something. Sarah now basically says that she thinks this happened, that there's only one incident that she can think of at which point she felt that actually her heart was moving. She said she'd been sleeping one night and woke up with crazy intense chest pains, the kind she has never experienced before, and genuinely thought she was having a heart attack. And so she woke up, was trying to gather her things to get herself to the hospital. Like, it was a vicious eviscerating pain. But by the time she was ready to head to the hospital, the pain stopped. And so my dude decided that since there was no more pain, she was just gonna lay back down and go to sleep. Sarah lay back down and went to sleep after experiencing severe chest pains that she actually described to me, saying that it actually felt like my heart was moving. I'm like, so why would you go back to bed? Never mind. I'm like, okay, but what could have caused, because I forgot to put this part in. Apparently the doctor had said that it looked like there was a tear in her diaphragm, like here in her chest, and that tear had caused some of her innards basically to shift into her chest cavity, and that had shifted her heart over to the side, because also part of her lung was not clear or had been shifted. It was crazy, like shit was moving around inside of Sarah that should not have been moving around inside of Sarah. And I'm like, okay, this is the wildest story I've heard in a long time, but what caused the tear in your diaphragm that would have allowed all of this? And she says, oh, well, the only thing that she can think of was that maybe a few weeks prior, she was going somewhere and she was about to enter a bus, and she had this little premonition to not enter the bus. And my friend Sarah has a lot of premonitions, and I'm still going to gist you because she's kind of key to this whole story, and she had my brain thinking in a lot of spiritual direction, so bear with me. She says she had this little premonition to not get into the bus because she's like, but shook it off, because also she not bad babe. Doesn't really matter what the premonition is premonitioning. She's like, I'm not afraid of anything. Why shouldn't I go there? Let me go. Enters the bus. And as the bus is going really, really fast, they've been asking the driver to slow down, but bus driver is moving at crazy pace. 2 wheels of the bus burst. The car begins to spin. These are one of the bridges, or that third mainland, I can't remember. I was just fascinated by this whole story. The car begins to spin, the bus begins to spin, and Sarah is looking at oncoming railing, because she's sitting at the side of the bus where the door is open, because the bus they closed, door is missing, and she's thinking, shit, we're probably gonna hit that railing, and if we hit that railing, I have to not go over the railing, because I don't know if I'll survive if I go over the railing. So she's trying to map this, as this thing is happening in real time. She's trying to map out how she will hold on to the railing of the bridge so that she doesn't go over. So bus slams into the railing, and she's putting her hand out to try and do something to brace herself, to help herself, but instead of flipping, the bus rebounds off the railing. So she thinks that the only thing that could have caused that tear in her diaphragm is the impacts, because she felt it all the way up her arm, all the way up her side and her chest, and maybe that caused some kind of damage. And I said, excuse me, auntie, excuse me, you were inside accidents? She said yes. I say very good. And after the accident, and you do not think maybe you should go to hospital to check yourself? She was like, no, because she was fine. And I want us to pause here at this very junction, and remind ourselves in this moment, because we're all fond of doing this from time to time, that if you are in an accident, God forbid, but you happen to so find yourself in an accident, and you walk out apparently unscathed, please go to a hospital and get yourself checked out. Also, if perchance you happen to be sleeping and you're woken up with eviscerating pain, the kind of which you have never felt before, and it's almost hard to describe, so much so that you were in a panic and thought you were having a heart attack, if you should so find yourself in such a situation and that pain should suddenly stop, very good. Please, you will still carry yourself and go to hospital. Let them check the source of that pain. Very good. So now this is how my friend Sarah was telling me this stuff, and I said, what? And Sarah said, and there were all these different things. I was like, man, first of all, thank God that you survived this. This is a crazy situation. I can't believe, because yeah. And that in the course of all of this happening, in fact, when they had gone to this prayer circle, I'm even trying to think how we got to this part of the story, but she had gone to this gathering, this community of like-minded people who sit to discuss things around the spiritual, around the universe and whatnot, of non-denominational practitioners on a Sunday. And in one such circle had met a Dibia. Now, Dibia, from what I understand, is like a South African Sangoma. It's like a priest of sorts, but like an Ifa priest, but the Igbo version. In the Igbo cultural tradition, Idibia, and they can read stones and things like that. I don't know if it's stones that you call it, but you know what I mean. They practice divination. They worship according to the order of their own belief, from what I understand. Sarah had now met this Dibia, and this Dibia had told Sarah that she was being called to go to Benin, which is where Sarah is from. That Sarah was the incarnation of a great ancestor, and that Sarah needed to go back to Benin to make peace with the deity, that there's a deity that their lineage, her great grandmother, of who she's the reincarnation, apparently, has been trying to reach out to her. And then Sarah tells me that actually before she even met the Dibia, that for quite a while she'd been having this recurring dream where she would go to sleep and she would see this old woman in white every night just looking at her. And I said, old woman here just looking at you. How did it make you feel? And she goes, that she didn't feel any type of way. She was very calm about it. And that every morning after the dream, if she would open her front door, there would be a single white feather on the floor. Every morning. I said, wonderfully wonderful. And that was not the first time that this message had come to Sarah. Sarah had also had this message from her auntie who'd come to see her weeks and weeks again before this incident, before a lot of things, like several occurrences in Sarah's life. And this auntie was like, I think she had not seen this auntie for a very long time, also from Benin, had come to visit her and her brother or something, and said, is that not Sarah I'm looking at? And Sarah's brother was like, yeah, that's Sarah. But she looks so much like her great Kiniko. I think you have seen it. Then the auntie says, you have to come to Benin. No, come and see us in Benin. Well, okay, come and see us. So in different ways, these things have been coming up over and over again. And I asked Sarah, why haven't you gone to Benin? Out of curiosity. Because you see, I believe that, and part of the conversation we had in this circle community, this gathering of like minds, was how art is so much more than beauty. Art is our history. Art is our language. Art is the way that our forefathers and our ancestors speak to us, and how art is how that comes through in our day-to-day life. Art is information. It's DNA programming. Art is a core part of who we are. I even wrote down a few things that I was inspired or that I was picking up while different people were talking. For me, I wrote down that, art is defiant, and it is defiance. This is what it means to me to create in the face of brutality. It is to be defiant. It requires courage. To create art requires courage, to do the thing that is programmed in your DNA to do, to communicate the way that your ancestors want you to communicate, to put out in the world something that is needing to be in the world, that needs to burst free, that needs to come out of you. Art doesn't come from a tangible place. Art comes from the intangible. Art comes from the unseen. Art requires courage. It requires courage. It requires possibly a little bit of madness. It definitely requires vulnerability. It requires vulnerability, and that vulnerability requires courage. And it requires uncommon courage. And that is something that my friend Sarah has. Every time I think about this person, every time I come across this person, I just keep thinking, this person has uncommon courage. I'll give you another example of Sarah's uncommon courage. Even during this facilitation, the facilitator was very interesting for me to experience. They were not the type of spiritual guides one would expect. You know, when you come across priests and typically religious people, knowing that all of us are human, so everybody has different personalities, you come across people who are a little bit sage and mindful in their tone and mindful in their words and mindful in how they communicate. This person was very dramatic and very expressive and I was like, I'm an actor, but this is quite a performance. Now, it's not to say that they were incorrect necessarily in anything that they said. I mean, even a broken clock is right twice a day. But it felt like the performance of a thing versus the reality of a thing. So much so that when this person who also said that they were a dibia, when this facilitator said that they were a dibia, and they'd gone around asking all of us to express ourselves, and I've told you what my expression was, as art is a defiant and defiance, and different people sort of shared different things in the room. Then it came to another member who is the dibia that spoke to my friend Sarah, was also present, and she asked this dibia, to create space that is not naive, what do you say? What are your expressions? And for all of us, she kind of probed, and she'd say things like, I don't mean to be an asshole, but I need you to speak, and she was probing. She was probing. And when she got to this dibia, not initially knowing that it was a dibia, or at least not having been told, she asked, and this man responded and just said, he was a bit dismissive at first, like, what are you saying? He just looked like he wasn't paying attention. And then eventually, after much prompting, this guy says, it is what it is. And she goes, yeah, it really is what it is. And then carries on with the rest of the session. And my friend Sarah says, excuse me, no. I was expecting to see some deep exchange that all of us can benefit from, because the two of you are supposed to be operating on a different plane. And I wonder that what wisdom can you share with us in this moment? Because, there was a lot of back and forth. Basically, my friend Sarah challenged the facilitator, saying that you tried to skip over this dibia and you haven't gone into any depth, and you haven't pushed, or you haven't asked any questions, and you haven't probed. And why is that? Why would you not probe when the rest of us, you asked us all these questions? Can we not all learn from things that we share here? And it was very instructional for me what I witnessed. I witnessed, on the one hand, let's say Dibia 1. I witnessed Dibia 1 exhibit what I felt was an intense level of calm, but also an intense level of shielding. Have you ever come across people that don't want to give you any information? They're just very still, they're very silent, they're very watchful, they don't really say much, they just observe. And that's what I experienced in that moment, watching that. And I watched the facilitator, Dibia 2, somewhat a little bit agitated. That's what it looked like to me, wanting to avoid confrontation, seemed a little bit unsure. And when there was more probing by the crowd, specifically by my friend Sarah, because she has uncommon courage and doesn't necessarily care how people feel, and doesn't say these things or ask these questions in any way that's necessarily aggressive, but is definitely demanding and probing herself. And so the facilitator says to Dibia 1 that, okay, tell me, what do you see in me? Because you're shielding yourself. And she used that term, like basically, this person, is not really, I get it, I get the sense of a wall, so there's not much I can do. With everybody else, you kind of have to give me permission. And said something very interesting, that everybody leaks a little bit. Everybody, your body language will give away things. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And it's true. Your body language will give away things. You'll talk. And once you start talking, that's kind of like, permission. And so when the facilitator asked Dibia 1 that, how far what you see in me, Dibia 1 said, I see an ancient entity that's carved a niche for themselves, and kind of went a bit silent. And I thought that phrasing was so interesting, and especially thinking of that phrasing in combination with what a facilitator had said earlier, basically saying that I don't have permission to enter. And anyone who's seen Sinners, I just found it so interesting. And it's kind of a reminder for all of us as well that there are different ways that we invite people into our energy field, into our spiritual field, that really perhaps we shouldn't be giving permission to enter those fields, that we shouldn't be opening ourselves to. We see it a lot in spiritual spaces. We see it in churches, we see it in mosques, where religious leaders or spiritual leaders are taking advantage of those who are deeply empathetic, those who are deeply feeling, and those who are deeply in search of something outside of themselves or something higher than themselves. We see how people open themselves up without care, without thought. And I just thought, this is so interesting to observe this in real time. And that's what I learned from that interaction. I also learned that it is important to trust one's intuition, because when I entered, I didn't want to be judgmental after watching this facilitator talk for a while, because part of the rules of this space is, we do not judge others. I said, we look, we don't judge. We look, we don't judge. And really why I'd gone to this space is because I wanted to spend time with my friend Sarah, which I did more of later on in the day. But, I had a little bit of time and I just wasn't sure when I'd get to see her again. So I said, make sure you go, because she has all this stuff that she spoke to you about over the phone, but I want to see her in person, see how she's doing, feel their energy. There's something about connecting with people like that. And there's certain friends of mine who it's just important to be in their space, and who, for me, we are kindred spirits. We operate in similar, maybe emotional, metaphysical spaces. And so after that circle had happened, much later in the evening, I went to spend more time with her, and we spoke at length about so many things, about the many occurrences through her life, where at different points the messages were coming through over and over again. Go to Benin, go to Benin, go to Benin. And I just thought, that's so interesting. Why are you not going? And honestly, I think it's fear. It's another form of fear, because Sarah prides herself very much on being tough, on being pragmatic, on being a bit of a rebel. And when we hold definitions above all else, and when we hold titles above all else, so these rigid frameworks of who we are, who we think we are, we cannot evolve to be more than that. Sarah is so sure of her present reality and enjoyments that she did not want to risk being called into another line, another lineage, another type of work, into evolving, because from all indications, the many callings on her life, down to these physical and medical malfunctions, which some might interpret as spiritual, in which people in her life, again at different points, have said, you're not stepping into your power by your not knowing who you are. There are people around you who will continue to pay the price for that, because you see, when you are a light and you emit light from the inside, and that light comes across as energy forms in different ways. So sometimes it just means people just gravitate towards you. They like you. They like the way you are. It can be down to beg herself. When there are 5 of you in a space and other people have more money, it's you that they're coming to. And it's because they're literally drawn to your light. You're putting out a light. And for those who have eyes that see beyond the physical, that's even more, it can be even more dangerous. Because imagine that someone means you harm, and they can see beyond the physical, and they can see your light, and they can see the potential of what that light can do, but you have not stepped into your own. They will seek to snuff it out. Because light attracts dark things too. Light attracts creatures of the dark as much as it attracts creatures of the light. So ignorance of your own light is dangerous. That's the message that I've kind of got. Deliberately ignoring your light in whatever form, whether it's your energy, whether it's how you communicate, deliberately ignoring the core of who you are, beyond the physical, beyond your job title, beyond what you can physically do, deliberately closing your eyes to the possibilities of who you are and what your energy, the intangible aspects of you, the part that goes when you die, the part that comes into your body when you are born. By ignoring the potential of that essence of you, you are doing yourself such a disservice in the world and in life. And I just found it so fascinating. And I feel like I've been running a little bit ragged recently with the different aspects of my life personally. And so because of that, I've been very particular about the time I've been spending with people and how I can allocate time. I barely have time for myself. And allocating this, it's like essentially a few hours, allocating essentially what would have been a few hours out of what should have been my rest time, was crazy work. But taking that time out to connect with this friend, even though it should have physically drained me, it also emotionally kind of nourished me. It is so important to spend time fulfilling the spiritual aspect of yourself, and it looks different for different people. You can pour into yourself, you can nourish yourself in different ways, but by finding kindred spirit, by connecting with them, by making sure that you're pouring into your soul, because your intuition is powerful, your soul is powerful. What God has put in you to be in this world and in worlds beyond this is so incredibly powerful. And I think sometimes, because we don't want to be laughed at, we don't want to be looked at as, oh my God, that person's so ridiculous, we kind of ignore those things. And I think I just really wanted to share this because I don't think we should be ignoring it. I think that with all the other things that we're doing, with all the other realities that we're living, that's spiritual. And that spiritual comes through in our art. That spiritual comes through in every creative expression. That spiritual comes through in the connections that we establish with other humans, with plants, with animals. It comes through so strongly. That is the divine. And I honestly just encourage all of us to nurture that. Nurture that. Nurture that. The truth is, there's so much more of this, my friends, just I want to give you, but I'm so scared of spilling the beans of somebody's life. So I cannot even gist you the way I really want to gist you that gist, because it's deep. Like what this babe has seen in her life. She has seen somebody with spirit girlfriend. She has seen pastors come up to her randomly and say, oh, I know this, I see this on you. I see, bruh, the things that are happening in this life, you would not believe. You would not believe. And especially as an African, especially as a Nigerian, we live side by side with the spiritual. Ikombe, strange but true. Strange but true. Do not allow the fear of looking foolish keep you from discovering something important, mystical and magical about yourself and about your reality. Nurture your intuition. Speak to God however it is best that you speak to God, whether it is through your creative work, or whether it is through your art, or whether it is through going to church, or whether it is through going to the beach and sitting in nature. Speak to God the way you know how. Speak to God and listen. And beyond speaking, listen. Create stillness. Create time for silence so that you can listen. If you are not silent, you cannot hear God speak. If you are not still, you cannot hear God speak. And this modern world, what it is doing to us, it is making us run ragged in circles. So we start ignoring the time that we should be giving to just be still and hear God speak. That's kind of what was in my soul to share with you today. And every time I open my mouth and I share things with you guys, it reminds me of things that I need to share with myself. Because as I told you, I've been running ragged, but I really just need to be still and hear God speak. And taking time out to be still and connect with the people I've connected with recently has been nourishing. It's been deeply nourishing. I've connected with two very important friends of mine who are important kindred spirits, who are like my sisters. And I encourage you to do the same. All right. Until next time, thanks for joining me on this very interesting episode of the Stormcast. I will see you same time next week. Bye-bye.